Welcome to another Parenting Athletic Kids Essentials podcast. We have Paul Weidner with us once again. Paul, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be back again.
Great to have you, as always. We're going to get into age-specific considerations for mental skills, tools, parents, that you can help your son or daughter with in age-specific categories. And as always, this is kind of a sliding scale, so some kids will latch onto things a little quicker, and we'll talk about how you can kind of watch that and know when they're gaining ground on this. Some kids, it might take a little bit longer, but we'll dive into all that. We'll cover all that as we're going through this. So again, age-specific mental skills, tools that you can help your son or daughter to implement that will optimize their growth throughout this process. So we're going to start with age group 8 to 12, and it could be a little younger, it could be a little older, but we want to talk about two main areas that we want to see progress in with this age. And those two things are, number one, focusing on controllable aspects of the sport, and number two, helping them to achieve a growth mindset through sport. So Paul, thoughts on that kind of right out of the gate here? Anything else you would add to that? But those are the two things I think we came up with leading up to the podcast. How can we focus? And parents, let me say this first. 8 to 12, let's make sure they're having a really good time. But within that, we can help them to focus on controllable aspects of their sport, which will help them to have a good time, and a growth mindset, which will help them to have a good time and play with passion as well. Anything you'd add to that, Paul?
I think as we look at this, and it's a beautiful thing about the development of people through sports or just kids in general, is that we get to decide and hopefully push on them more autonomy as quickly as they're able to handle it. And so when I think about mental skills from an 8 to 12 U standpoint, I think about a lot of the same things that we would ask of a 13 to and older all the way up. We're asking the same thing of them, but just understanding that maybe at 9 years old, the routine that we want them to have in the batter's box, in their minds, maybe has a little bit less of an in-depth why behind it, and more of just like, because I know it feels good because I do it multiple times. Whereas if I'm talking to a college athlete, I want them to understand that the type of breath that we need to take is trying to skew oxygen levels, like that you can feed them more information because that's an empowering thing. You clutter the mind of an 8 to 12-year-old, but you as a parent are so equipped more than anybody else to understand when it's time for them to be fed a little bit more information on the why, because we want them to have autonomy. And so I know I didn't answer any of the question necessarily, but like when I think about breaking up the age groups, it's so important, and so important for you as parents to know that you get to decide kind of when it becomes more depth, even though I think some of the things that I have that I can think of are actually very similar, 8 to 12 and 13 plus. It's just the delivery of it is probably a little bit different. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's where my mind goes.
Yeah, I do. For me, that carries into the tools that we're about to give you, and how they're kind of a little bit more simpler at a younger age, and then they get a little bit more complex and a little more complex, and the kid can take on, as they become not so much kids, but more young adults and what have you, they can take on a little bit more information from this. So simplifying the message at earlier ages, but still trying to, I think what we've gotten to a point in sport is where we used to like just drop kids off. I know when I was a young athlete, just drop me off, and I probably gained some of these skills. But we've just gotten to a point where sports has become more, and I think in a great way, more about development, both on and off the field. So as we're going through these skills should help them in the classroom, in their relationships. But again, as we always go back to, and Paul emphasizes quite often, this is about helping them to be the best athlete that they can be at the same time. So these skills can go in a bunch of different directions, but let's dive into it. So again, 8 to 12 years old, and I've coached this age group And these are the things for sure that I thought were most valuable in coaching, and Paul's coached this age group too. So we want them, again, to focus on, and grab your pencils and papers, controllable aspects of the game and working towards a growth mindset. So do we need to get into what those look like? The controllable aspects, again, so important because they won't ride the highs and lows. They will see consistent development that oftentimes when they're focused on things outside of their control, they don't see. They get 3 hits one day, no hits the next day. So focusing on controllable aspects, and what do those look like? 3 things: energy, effort, engagement. Let's get them focused. How's your energy? How's your effort? How's your engagement with your teammates and with your coaches? Let's focus on those 3 things. If they do that, they will consistently see progress in those. Well, not consistently, but they can work towards more consistent progress in those areas. They will have the best time they can have out on the field. And as parents, it helps us to step back a little bit and not focus so much on the results, which then helps our son or daughter not focus so much on the results. So that's the controllable part. Super, super important. Anything you add to that before I get into the growth mindset piece?
Nope, have at it. Go growth mindset.
Okay. So the growth mindset piece helps us to focus on learning, growing, getting better. So a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A growth mindset for athletes is saying, if I work really hard, I will get better at this. A fixed mindset is like, I'm stuck. I'm only a certain level of athlete, baseball player, football player, whatever it might be. We really want athletes to have a growth mindset where they feel like if they put out energy, effort, and are engaged, they will grow and get better. Okay, that's a simplified way to talk about growth mindset, but I think that's kind of to the point of it. So these are the 2 main areas of focus, 8 to 12 years old. Anything you'd add to the growth mindset piece?
No, I'm curious to talk about, I know that there's some things that we were going to get into as far as specific mental skills go, and then just how that gets delivered with the growth mindset in mind, and the controllables in mind, because all of the skills are ultimately, and tools that we try to give are drawing it back to those things, right? It's like, why do we journal? Well, it's because it puts our mind in a good place to focus on growth and controllables and all that stuff. And the delivery of it, like an easy thing I could think of is like, imagine asking an 8-year-old to journal before the game, and the question you as a coach might ask the 8-year-old to journal about versus the 18-year-old. Both are journaling, right? But the question can be very different from what you're trying to bring out in them, even though even the end result of controllable and growth mindset is what you're after for both. But the question can be the same. And so I want you to get into that. I want you to get into some of the tools that you think of, or the mental skills that you think of from an 8 to 12-year-old standpoint, journaling being one of them. I know that you're really big into journaling, and I've seen you deliver that better than maybe anybody I've ever seen. So I want to know your thought on that.
Yep. So let's dive into it. So again, as you're writing down your notes, parents, 8 to 12 years old, focusing on controllables and a growth mindset. How do we do that? The number 1 thing is journaling. So journaling will allow your athlete to write down, and writing things down helps them to focus on the importance of it. We talk about it too, yes, but we want them to write it down. So pre-game, pre-practice journaling, we want them to write down in their journal, controllable things I will focus on today. Okay? Controllable things that I will focus on today. So effort, energy, engagement, being a great teammate, having a lot of fun, overcoming adversity, overcoming a bad call, all these great things that they'll write down, and that's where they're going to place their focus. So obviously, if they write down things that they can control, that's focusing on controllables. The growth mindset piece then comes afterwards. Okay, so pregame, pre-practice, things I will focus on today that I have total control over. Afterwards, what did I do well? So anything I did well, we always start our journaling with things we did well. Man, I was a great teammate today. Man, I overcame resilience. Man, I got 3 hits. Okay. Anything they did well, I love it. Whatever it might be. It might be uncontrollable things here. It might be controllable things, whatever. It might be physical things. It might be mental. Just let them write down anything they did well. Second thing they write down, things they want to work on. Okay, here's the growth mindset piece. Okay, I want to work on my backhand. I want to work on my 2-strike approach. I want to work on my free throws. I want to work on my layups, left-handed dribble, whatever it might be. Okay, anything they want to work on, let them write it down. And then the last piece, the really big growth mindset piece, how will I work on those things? Okay, how can I get better at those things? So now they show up at practice the next day. They feel like they have some control over this, some autonomy through this. And they're seeing that if I put in the work, I will get better. And that's all we're talking to them about as parents. You can ask them, did you journal before the game? Write down your controllables. Did you journal after the game? What did you do great? We have conversations about that. Okay, what do you want to work on? How do you want to work on? This is, they might have questions. I'm not sure how to work on this. Can you help as a parent? I'm not sure about this. When my kids wrestled and wrote down things they needed to work on, I was like, you better talk to coach. Now we're building up some engagement with coach. Okay. Coach is putting some stock and some effort and energy into us. It's this snowball that just gets rolling down the hill. Growth mindset, focused on controllables. So that's really, for me, that's where it all starts in the 8 to 12-year-old range. The other mental skills and tools that come out of that are just conversations with parents, with coaches. How do I get better? What do I need to do? Where are the holes in this? Like if I struggle with my strikeouts, okay, how do I bounce back from that sooner? They're starting to build autonomy. Great conversations with parents. We can help them with this stuff in that 8 to 12 range, or we send them to their coaches, ask the coaches for help. Thoughts on that, Paul?
And this is not because you didn't mention it a bunch, but the fact that that everything that's written down in a journal, specifically, especially before the event happens, is talking about controllables. I just want to go back to give you as parents something to think about or be looking out for. Kids and athletes are oftentimes very good at goal setting, or they've had people do goal setting things with them. And there's nothing wrong with a goal setting session that includes, I'd like to, whether it's an individual thing, I'd like to hit 300 this year, or I'd like to whatever. I am totally for those types of things. But kids are not as good at then understanding the process goals that go into giving themselves the best chance to achieve those goals. And so if your son or daughter is journaling, and in that journal is like, okay, so what do we want to have happen today? You have to make sure that they are going to a place that's controllable and not going to like, oh, I want to get 2 hits today. Because in their mind, there's nothing wrong with that. And in your mind, there shouldn't be anything wrong with that either. But I think we can start to see it unravel when we say, well, there's literally nothing else I can write underneath that, because that's either going to happen because some combination of variables let that happen, or it's not. But all of the follow-up questions that you pose, which are excellent in journaling, only happen when that goal is a controllable goal, because then the steps that I can take are also controllable, and the how is also controllable, and whereas the result-based goal just starts and ends with they wrote down they want to get 2 hits today, and then we go see if that happens. I don't know. So just want to reemphasize that part and make sure that you are very clear with the athlete if you're having them journal, that you are journaling something controllable. Absolutely.
I would even say that in that 8 to 12 range, we try to steer them away from any outcome-based goals.
Right.
Because what I've seen is one of 2 things. Kids write down the goals and then controllables, but then they go back to really focus on the goals. I want to get 2 hits today. It's really hard for them to do that. Or the kids that write down goals write just controllable goals. Yeah. So In my mind, I hope that wasn't confusing. In my mind, in that 8 to 12 range, let's stay away from an outcome-based goal. We'll get there. We'll get there. And that is important, to Paul's point. But the kids that I've seen that write down the outcome-based goal, the uncontrollable goal, struggle way more with focusing on the controllables. That's like the first thing they go to and the first thing they write down. And even if they have control over effort, energy, engagement, I still didn't get my 2 hits. We really want them to launch into the process, the routines, the controllables in this age range. If they are writing down, and maybe you disagree with this, Paul, but it'll change at 13. Okay, so through this, I can think of specific athletes that would journal, and the ones that would write down their goals, and the goals were controllable goals, overcame adversity much faster, much easier, more consistently, stayed on a consistent level with their energy, effort, and engagement, way more than the ones that wrote down uncontrollable outcome-based goals. Yeah. So 8 to 12, focus on controllables. They can have controllable goals, okay? Or they can just say, I'm going to focus on this process. I hope that this isn't getting confusing, which is all controllable things. Does that make sense?
It does. So what are some things? So there's process. In your mind, what is the difference between a process goal that maybe has some outcome to it, but it's an outcome goal, and a process goal from, even if both of them are controllable. So process we know is controlled, right? But a controllable outcome goal. Can you think of an example of some of those, just so we know what we're looking to control, like looking to go to and looking to avoid?
I think so. So it's really close. So if you're talking about controllable outcome goals, I will have good energy all day today. Okay. Is that different than the process? It's just in the wording. Okay. My process will be, I'm going to attempt to have good energy all day today. Yep. So it's just about thinking about, at the end of the day, at the end of the game, at the end of the practice, what is my outcome versus what am I going to do all practice long? Does that make sense?
It does.
So when we have uncontrollables, it's easy. We just place those at the end of the game or the practice, those uncontrollable goals.
For sure.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to make this confusing. It can be just, maybe you just 8 to 12, you just focus on the process. There's no outcome goals here at all. Focus on the process, and those are always controllable things, and or the outcome needs to be controllable things as well.
Yep, good. Yeah, I like that a lot. And you asked me if I disagree with you on the writing down of outcome-based goals from an 8 to 12. I don't disagree with you on that. I think that that's just too, probably a little bit too delicate to try to steer them away from a focus being on something else. The only, and I don't think you would disagree with me on this for the most, but you can if you want to. What I don't like is 8 to 12 years old, us trying to take them as far away as we can from having them face the reality of sometimes there are successes and sometimes there are failures. And that's what I don't want, because you're setting a foundation for competitive nature as well as resiliency of something that did happen that was bad. So like, I don't want them to focus on writing down a goal that was, I want to hit 300. I would agree, 8 to 12, like, let's not do that at all. But I don't want them to not have to deal with bracket play. There was games that we won and that we lost, not because it matters at 8 to 12, but because it matters that you've been forced to deal with it at that age. And so that's where I get hesitant to remove any sort of outcome-based thought processes in 8 to 12 years old. Anybody that loses perspective about what it means at 8 to 12 years old, I would just say, like, shame on you, don't do that. But you have to have some sense of, I am not hitting well right now. I'm 0 for my last 8. Don't like it's fine, but you're feeling angry about that. Let's work through that, and not, instead of being like, we didn't keep track of it. Like, well, we did, and you're 0 for your last 8. Now let's work through that in a healthy way. And so that's really, I don't know if I actually fully nailed the way I would like to articulate that, but 8 to 12 years old, the outcomes mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. And if you think it does, I just totally disagree with you. But let's start to face the reality of success and failure versus we don't keep score, we don't do any of that. Because I think that's actually healthy as you transition into the next stage of competitive sports.
I think the kids will know that they didn't have a good outcome. They'll know if they got hits or didn't get hits. And so we don't have to spend any time, energy, effort reiterating that. And when they get in their journal and they said, what did I do well? On those bad days, they're going to really struggle. They're going to really struggle. And we as parents might have to help them. Listen, you stole that base. You know, you hustled out onto the field after a strikeout. They're going to already be beating themselves up. There's not one kid that I coached, and I coached both my sons, through 8 to 12 years old. So I don't know how many teams that is. There's not one kid I have that didn't beat themselves up when they had a bad game. So I don't think we have to go down that path. I think we have to steer them towards, okay, they got in their journal. They really struggled to write down what they did well. Let's help them with that. Let's remember these things. Now we get into, okay, what do you want to work on? And this is where they're going to lay it all out there. Well, I got 0 hits. I need to work on my hitting. How do we do that? How do you get better? How do we define that? Do we need to spend more time at the cage? Do we need to work on a specific pitch that we need to hit? Do we need to work on whatever it might be? So I really think we want to steer them the other way. To your point, I think they will learn that lesson.
Yeah. And I don't agree with you on that at all. I do think you're right. It's just and then hopefully they have great coaches and great parents that will help them with the beginning processes of managing that failure. Not that we need to bring it to their attention, but just call it out when they see it. They know. You're right. I mean, you're 100% right. Everything you're saying. They know, and then just like start that process of being a great person that can help them begin to build the resiliency and all those types of qualities that we're looking for that really come into play more when things are even harder, which is when they're 13 and older, right? Because they hopefully they already have those qualities. So that's good.
So the big thing I think about with this is when are kids, and I don't know if we need to go down this path, but kids are quitting sports at about 13, 14. And I think a big reason for that is they get in this 8 to 12 range and they're beating themselves up so bad, for having tough games, for having bad games, for not being on the level of Johnny, who hits in the 3 slot and they're hitting in the 9, or maybe only playing half the games or whatever. They're beating themselves up already. So we need to stay away from that beating and saying, we see progress. Here are the things you're doing well. Like, you didn't do this so well 2 weeks ago, and now you are doing it well. That's great. That's progress. That's development. And even for Johnny, who's hitting in the 3 spot, there's things to work on. We want them to understand that working on, focus on the great things that Johnny's doing, but also there's things that we continue to work on to develop and get better and better. Because we've also seen kids at this 13, 14 that were dominant and just laid into that and didn't focus on growth and getting better. So I'm getting ahead of myself. But I want kids at that 8 to 12, like, how do we get them to be most passionate, see development, have a lot of fun? And I think journaling in this manner is a great way to do that. So
right. Love it.
Let's jump to the next thing, and you'll see. I mean, this progresses, right? So kind of the 13 to 15 age range. I would still have them journal. Now they can start writing down my goals. Okay, so my goals for this game: I want to get 3 hits. I want to hit a double. Okay, So the journaling stays the same, but now we can write down some goals. And what this does for a lot of kids, and again, kids are different, this might help to push the energy, the effort, the engagement, right? So now I have set out there, I want to score 20 points. That helps them to tap into a higher level of energy, effort, engagement. Okay, now we can help them work through, okay, you have that set for 20 points, get 3 hits. What do you have to do? What are the controllables that will help you score those 20 points, get those 3 hits, right? So we're taking it to a different level. But we hope that through the 8 to 12 range, that we know that I know that if I focus on my process, my controllables, I can have the most success that I can have on this day. And I can stay away from all those negative, useless thoughts that pop into my head. So what are my goals for the game? And then what are the controllables that will help me to achieve those goals? I think at this point also adding in, what are my goals physically? So have those pencil and paper out, parents. So we're adding in goals to the journaling, physical and mental goals. Okay. So physical goals, I'd like to get 3 hits. Mental goals, I'd like to bounce back from adversity faster. Okay. And then the process for achieving those goals. I have a goal of scoring 20 points. I need to make sure my warm-up is really good. I take X amount of shots from the 3-point line, whatever I need to do. We're starting to develop this process, this routine of, in order to maximize my abilities, best chance of success, I need to do these physical things and these mental things. Okay. So to circle back, what are my physical and mental goals? What are my controllables for attaining those goals? That's pre-game, pre-practice. It'll look a little different in practice. You might not have goals. Maybe it's just focusing on controllables, but pre-practice, pre-game. Let's get into that journal. It's 5 minutes. Okay. Let's lock that in. It's also saying lock that in. Like now I have a direct focus of where I'm going to place my attention in practices and games. I don't get scattered thoughts. Things aren't coming in. I know I need to do this. Energy, effort, engagement. I know I need to do this. And it goes beyond that at this point too, where again, physical things I need to make sure I'm doing, whatever it might be. Afterwards, same thing. What did I do well, physically and mentally? What do I want to work on, physically and mentally? How do I work on those things, physically, mentally? Okay, I'm setting myself up for next practice, next game, things I want to change, things I did really well. I want to do those again. So I'm also focusing on the great things, right? We talk about this, like perfectionists at this, get into this mode of it's do better, do better, do better. I want to focus on the things I do really well. So I always start with that. That leads to more confidence when I go to the next game. Man, I really did this great last game. Let me do that again. Okay, awesome. But then what do I want to work on when I get to practice physically and mentally, and how I'm going to work on that? And again, that leads to more engagement with coaches, with teammates, with parents. Help me. How do I work on these things? Questions about that. So those are the journaling things. We'll get into some more stuff beyond that, but changing the journal to some goal setting stuff, physically and mentally, but then going back to the controllables for that. Afterwards, what did I do well physically, mentally? What do I want to work on physically, mentally? How do I want to work on those things physically, mentally? Thoughts, questions on that?
No, I've seen you deliver that so well with athletes that are roughly in that age group and then also older too. And it just worked so well. So I'm glad you elaborated on that and talked through that. Because I think that I've seen it firsthand, and it works super, super well to keep them all in the right spot. And so that was a nice job. So let's move to the next age group if you'd like.
Well, let's stay on that. So I did also throw in, there's a couple other things I think that become important that kids at that age group can start to handle, and that's breath work. So again, there's more distractions. We're getting into high school ball. There's girls. There's boys, whatever it might be. So some breath work to settle in physically, mentally. We won't get too much into that, but understanding our breath, being able to locate our breath, nice deep breaths for calm, more rapid breaths for increasing energy, but diving into the breath work a little bit, focal points, looking at something, being totally engaged in whatever I'm looking at to, again, help to try to get into the present moment. Mantras, positive self-talk. I talked about in one podcast, the 3 R's, ways to refocus attention when something bad happens. So again, these are kind of higher level topics, but I think parents can start to think about, talk about, research, get into, learn about different ways to be in the present moment. If your son or daughter is having a hard time in any of these areas, okay, they write down mentally, I struggle to stay on task after a tough call. Okay, what can we do about that? Let's get into some reading, find out some things about how I can get back to the present moment, how I can be more resilient. Let's dive into that. Or leading your son or daughter into that topic. I mean, this is what we do as mental performance coaches, right? So we won't expand on that. But now getting into some of those more specific tools and techniques about how to be in the present moment, how to be more resilient. Thoughts on those, real. I went through those pretty quick. I don't know if you want to dive into those a little bit more. Thoughts on that stuff.
So from the 13U, and again, sliding scale, but 13 to 15U roughly, I think there can be a lot of success in having them develop and begin to own their routine. And that is what you just talked about with the breathing and the visualization or whatever, but it's both developing it, which I would actually argue you could start to develop the routine pre this, and it's a little bit more just because I know it works and because coach said so, and that's just what I do and I lean back on. And then once they get to a certain age, which certainly doesn't have to be a hard cutoff at 13, but they will start to own it. And there's nothing better than when they own it, because then they will adjust it. They will believe in it. They will, all of the things that are important about it. And I think at this age group that we're talking about, if they don't have a routine, they need to get one and build one. And then they need to start to own it, because if they don't, and of course you can develop ones later as well, but you're going to have nothing to lean back on when you need these types of things. And I think that this age range is appropriate for them to start developing that specific thing, a routine that they can own.
Well, and that generally includes a deep breath, a focal point, some positive self-talk. But yeah, that's something to, without going down too long of a windy road with this. I think most players have some physical things they do with routines, right? Like they go to the plate. I see 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds tap on the plate, swing the bat a little bit, just helping them as parents, helping them. I see you doing that. That looks really cool. Why do you do that? Make them a little bit aware of it. And then if you want to talk about throwing in a deep breath or a focal point at that point, I don't want to go too far down that path, but yeah, developing great routines is another thing at that 13 to 15 range. The mental part of the game a little bit more in that range age group. Really good. So 16 plus, I'll kick it off. Same things with the journaling. Journaling for me doesn't change. We have goals. We have controllables to reach those goals. We bang those out. A few more things, and again, this is a sliding scale, but we can start adding in some meditation, some visualization, some mindfulness work, different things, and we won't go down that path too much today, but just more skills and tools to help them stay in the present moment is really what those things are about. The other big thing I want to talk about with this age group is leaning into being a great competitor. So I really want you to dive into this. I think this is right in your wheelhouse. What does that look like? So we hear, coaches compete, 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 these different things. What does that mean? What does that look like? How can parents help their son or daughter to become a great competitor?
Yep. If they have a mentality of this is going to be a challenge and I run to that challenge, no matter how hard it might be, and no matter whether or not I think I'm going to, realistically succeed or fail or whatever. I can't think of too many great examples of that, but are they running to the fight, running to the challenge? That's a big hallmark of just being a great competitor. They want it. They lean into it. Go, 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 go. Another thing is part of being a competitor is an absolute acknowledgement that there are successes and there are failures. There are things that we can, that are going to go our way and not. There is a scoreboard. There all those different types of things. The difference, and the reason why we start making this important at roughly 16 and older, is because they should, at this point in time, be able to acknowledge how bad they want to win and work it back to the process of winning. So we've had, I've talked to you about this in previous conversations about there's the process, which is probably what younger athletes should be focusing on. And then when they get older, they can almost graduate to something that would be called the process of winning. Obviously, the stuff that's happening before that age is also the process of winning, but we sometimes take that word out of it because that makes it just clutters it and makes it too difficult for them. At 16 and older, when you're dang right, you're in a section championship game, or this is college athletics, and like, depending on the level you play, like there's probably more or less writing on it, but like people's jobs are at stake sometimes, like this is competitive athletics. So absolutely the scoreboard and the outcome matters, but do you understand the process of winning versus just focusing on winning? Winning has to be a part of it because it can drive those actions that are controllable. Your son Drew was great at articulating that. Like, yeah, I do want to show up and understand that I'm here to win, because I know that, the 7-8 hole hitter that, and not that this isn't Drew's example anymore, but the 7-8 hole hitter that sometimes gets down on himself, well, we need that guy. So that's going to drive my intent to be a great teammate to that guy that day and uplift him, because I know that he's going to come up in a big spot and I want him to be in a good place. Nobody would say that being a great teammate to that 7-8 hole hitter was a bad thing. They would say that's a great thing. But the result and the goal of winning drove that great action, not in a manipulative way, but because it gave him a guiding light into what it took to help be a great competitor that day. And winning is a part of that, So that's really what I think of in a nutshell is just run to that fight, run to that challenge. And then the flip side of that, of how much clarity you can actually get when you do look at winning, and then ask yourself, what are the steps to making that happen? And you decide that's what you're going to do the whole way through it.
Before moving to the next point, as you're talking through that, why is there such value in being a great competitor? What is the outcome? Why is that so important?
Well, it's assuming you can direct it the right way. It is certainly going to raise your intent and your effort and your energy. Like if you want something, your intent, energy, and effort go through the roof. The problem is when you want something, misplace that energy and effort and intent to the point where it can become to your detriment. So you wanting to win means that the bad call that the umpire made affects that in a negative way, and now your energy and effort goes to the umpire instead of the pitcher. That's where the immaturity or the lack of understanding that the thing I'm focusing on is to always stay in this fight with the pitcher, for lack of a better word, the fight with the pitcher, right? Not the fight with the umpire. But you're letting that be your guide of where you should be, where you should be directing your energy. But I think in a nutshell, people that are not competitive don't bring the same level of intent. They don't bring the same energy, and they don't bring the same effort that people that are just hyper competitive, which is why I've always been a huge, I hate this saying, like my son's or daughter is just a little too competitive, I think. Nope. You don't ever want to take that away from them. Like that means they're going to be great if they can start to understand that that competitive nature just needs to be directed to ways that will benefit the ultimate result that they're looking for. So I love competitive people, man. It's a great place to be. And we want a bunch of competitive athletes because their intent, their effort, and their energy will be very high.
Love that. Really, really well said. I think that's super important to understand what a great competitor looks like. High energy, high intent, high effort, high engagement with teammates, as you were talking about. The 7-hole hitter, like it can amplify things, and amplify things in team sports as a group, which we know, like just, oh man, that feeling, that passion, that all those great sports feelings just right go through the roof. So really good. I think parents should understand. I think if you see your son or daughter and they don't seem like they're super competitive, generally it's a fear. They're not focused on the right things. They're not focused on controllable. There's some fear there. So hopefully, as we've built this from 8 to 16 plus, we've eliminated fear by focusing on controllables and these other things, the growth mindset, these other things we talked about. And now they can just go out and let her buck, and the competitive stuff goes through the roof. How do parents help their son or daughter lean into this? I think, let me start and say, going back to all these things that we've gone through for the last 40 minutes and journaling and controllables and focusing on that is a great place to start. Other things you think at this point, 16 plus, how can parents help their son or daughter to be a great competitor?
Yep. No perfect answers to this at all. But one that's for sure true is what you just mentioned, which is trying to remove the fear. So like, what is it that you're afraid of? Are you afraid? I mean, sometimes honestly, like, are you afraid of what I will think if you get too invested in this and it doesn't work out? Are you afraid? I mean, those can be heavy conversations for sure, but like, that's one. Are you afraid that if you give all the effort and the intensity that comes with being a competitor, that it'll just hurt too much if it doesn't go well? And so trying to remove things versus maybe trying to give them things, because if they say they care about it and that's true, the only thing that's keeping them from being competitive then about it are actually things you have to remove, not things you have to give them. And I would argue that you can't force somebody to like something. So let's just operate under the assumption that they do like it. Like they are passionate about baseball, basketball, whatever it is. So now you're just looking to remove barriers, right? So fear is a big barrier to them just being like full speed ahead, pedal to the floor, let's go. And the an analogy is for the fear part about like, are you afraid of if you invest, it won't go well, would be, they're afraid to go to the top of the ladder. They only want to stop at rung number 2, because they know if they fall from the top of the ladder, which is full investment, full energy, full effort, it's going to hurt, right? Whereas rung 2, it doesn't, but you can't accomplish anything from rung number 2 either. So you're ultimately going to live a competitive existence that's just not fulfilling, even because you refuse to just let yourself get to a certain place. And so that's just one of the analogies I think of, but that's really where I want to go with that is really asking yourself, what can I remove that's keeping them from it versus some magic thing that you're trying to give them. The giving them isn't much because they just have to care about it and be passionate about it. And let's just assume they are, which if they're not, that's okay, but you better back up a bunch of steps and ask yourself what you want them to get out of it. Because there's things that I can think of that I technically participate in, but I'm certainly not as passionate about them as I am, like it's delivering mental performance sessions. I'm extremely passionate about that. I'm not as passionate about watching the NBA on a Tuesday. Like I don't even get into it, right? So just know that they're not going to be passionate about everything they do, but if they are passionate about it, let's remove the fear and see what happens.
Really good. Really good. So check in with the passion. If the competitiveness isn't showing up, Is this something that they're super passionate about? If the answer is yes, and they're still not showing that full energy, engagement, intent, what is going on? And asking them, don't make assumptions on this, parents. What I see is parents, coaches yelling, compete, and if they're not, there is something else going on there, right? There's something deeper that we need to ask them about. Are they passionate about what they're doing? And I know some athletes that are passionate, super passionate about it, but there is that fear piece. Something else is infiltrating their head at that time of being ultra competitive that is preventing them from jumping into that pool. So what is that? Again, hopefully with all the work you've done leading up to this age, it just is like a natural thing that just, okay, I'm ready to let this stuff burst and explode. This stuff I've been working on, here it comes. I'm going to go out and compete to the best of my abilities. Hopefully that's the case. But again, if not, we need to kind of take a deeper look at it and just not yell at them. Hey, compete. Really good. Awesome. We'll start wrapping this baby up, Paul. Anything you wanted to get up your chest through this age-specific group of mental tools?
No, I think this has been a really good discussion. And hopefully the more that we break it down in a few of our podcasts here by age, hopefully that does help parents, because sometimes you're wondering, does this apply to my athlete? And nobody knows that better than you either way, but breaking it down by age hopefully is a beneficial way for parents to try to digest these things and ask themselves what they can be doing specifically with my athlete, depending how old they are. Good.
Love it. So let me just kind of wrap this up real quick before we close out. And again, a sliding scale a little bit, but 8 to 12 years old, we want to focus on the controllables, a growth mindset through journaling. Pretty simple journaling. What am I going to focus on today? Controllable things am I going to focus on today and practice in games? Afterwards, what did I do well? What do I want to work on? How? Next age group, we're throwing in goals. The 13 to 15 kind of age group, goals for today, physical, mental goals, and then the controllables that will help me to reach those goals. And then afterwards, how did I do physically? What did I do well physically, mentally? What do I want to work on physically, mentally? How do I work on those things? Starting to incorporate some positive self-talk, some focal points, some breathing stuff. 16 plus, still journaling, doing all those things, throwing in, let's make sure we're going out there and competing to the best of our abilities. One thing I'll say, if that is an athlete's goal, I wanted to touch on this and then we'll wrap it up, I promise. If the goal is to go out and compete to the best of my abilities, and I have all these other processes built in, like that can be the only thing they think about. I'm going to go out and compete to the best of my abilities. What does that mean? That means I'm not listening to distractions. Distractions don't affect me. That means no matter what the umpire calls, I'm going to bounce back and be resilient, because I'm out here just consistently giving everything I got to this. So that ties in a lot of this mental performance work that Paul and I do. If we can go out and consistently, every second, every minute, every hour of every game, compete to the best of our abilities, we're good. It's going to take care of a lot of other things. So that's it. That's the wrap. Anything I missed on that?
No, I think that was great.
All right. Parents, thanks again for tuning in. Hope this helped. If you have any specific thoughts, questions for Paul or myself, feel free to email me at mindrighttraining@gmail.com or drop your comments, questions into the podcast. We'll be back again really soon with another podcast. Paul, again, thanks again for being here. It was really great, and we'll see you again really soon. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. Talk soon. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. If you want more information on strategies that you can use to help optimize your son or daughter's athletic experience, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.